Okay, today we're going to be discussing the question, are we happy? Can we be happy? How would we know if we're happy? And what exactly is happy? And again, those are strange questions to ask because it seems like we ought to know if we're happy or not. But believe it or not, it's not necessarily clear whether or not we're happy. When we stop and think back about our life in the past, do we consider our life to have been a happy one? Or has it been just a struggle to get by and we're so focused on those things we forgot to be happy? Well, today what we'd like to do is talk about what God has to say about happiness in our lives. Now, this message came to me as a result of a gentleman whose videos I watch from time to time. That they're not religious or anything. He just has a unique outlook on world events. And in watching this, when we were going through speech training, we were taught to be what's called sermon aware. If we see something that just it hits us in the face, as wow, that'd be something good to understand or talk about, or use it as an example in a message, that we write it down, we keep track of it so that we can use it. Well, this particular one happened a couple of weeks ago. And it felt to me as if God was suggesting a message for all of us, not just you guys, but me as well. The gentleman I was listening to, his name is Jeff Berwick, and he's the owner of the Dollar Vigilante system. And he did a video in which he discussed his happiness, what made him happy. When he was young, he thought that lots of money and women and travel would be the things that would lead him to be happy. And as he was reflecting, he was never happy with all of those things, even when he had achieved them by the reasonably early age of 30. He was a multimillionaire, and he had, as he said, women on every continent. And what he found was none of that stuff made him happy. So a short time later, he had actually lost almost all of his money, and he wasn't affected by it because those weren't the things that were making him happy. And what he discovered as he went along was that the things that made him happy are his wife and his children, and just sitting in his house watching his dogs play. Those things he has finally figured out make him happy. Well, I would submit that he doesn't really yet know true happiness because he doesn't have everything he needs, but he has everything that he knows he could have. But he appears to have stumbled across a secret to being happy, and that secret is quit dwelling on things and think about the people and the people in your family who are around you, those people that you care about. Dwell on those things and realize that those are really the things that make you happy. Okay. Well, Webster's dictionary defines happy, and I looked that up, and it's got a lot of definitions for happy. So we'll just take a few of them. I'll take the top, top three here. The top definition of happy was lucky, fortunate, or successful. Well, if you have good luck, people call you lucky, right? Well, I don't know what that has to do with being happy, but the definition includes those terms. The second definition is being in the enjoyment of agreeable sensations from the possession of goods. So people say that you're happy if you have possessions, right? Enjoying pleasure from the gratification of appetites or desires. Well, these are the very things that Jeff Burt was talking about did not make him happy. But yet some people must feel like those things make them happy because it's incorporated in the definition. The third definition is prosperous or having secure possession of good. Well, that's also the same type of thing that Jeff was talking about. And I'll go ahead and go to the fourth one. That which supplies pleasure, that furnishes enjoyment, agreeable, as applied to things as a happy condition. That's probably closer to the real definition of what God has. How He wants us to be happy. A happy condition. The condition in our lives where we can look around and we're filled with joy, not from the things that we have, but from our life, the things that we experience. I went ahead and looked up in the online free dictionary the antonym or the exact opposite for happy, so sometimes you can understand a word by what its opposites are. So here are the antonyms or the opposites for the word happy: low, sad, depressed, sorry, unhappy. Well, that goes without saying. You put un in front of anything, it's the opposite. Miserable, gloomy, discontented, melancholy, somber, forlorn, displeased, mournful, despondent, sorrowful, joyless, down in the dumps. So all those are described as the opposite of being happy, and I would say probably those are the opposite of being happy. Discontented just kind of jumps out at you. Remember that in the scripture we're told to be content in every condition we find ourselves. So if we're told to be content in everything that we're involved in, we're being told to be happy, not unhappy. Well, you know, Solomon also came to understand this principle. If you'll turn over to Ezekiel 2 and verse 1. He thought, like Jeff, that by his possessions, the many things that he had, he would be happy. And he came to a completely different understanding as he got towards the end of his life. You know, he was considered the wisest man of his time, and perhaps the wisest man who ever lived. He was very likely the richest man on the earth at the time that he was king. But look at what he has to say, and this is a rather long reading. We're going to read most of Ecclesiastes 2. I don't remember if I said Ezekiel or Ecclesiastes, but it's Ecclesiastes 2. And beginning in verse 1. And here's what he says. I said in my heart, you know, he's talking to himself. He's thinking is what he's doing. I'm thinking, come now, I'm going to test you with mirth. I'm going to test myself with mirth. I'm going to give myself all the fun things, happiness and joy and partying and everything that would cause mirth. Therefore, consider and behold goodness, that this is also vanity. I said of laughter, it's madness. And of mirth, what does it do? What good is it? That's what he's saying. He says, what good is laughter when things are so crazy? And what does it do? I sought in my heart to drag my flesh with wine. He wanted to just drink a bunch of wine and have a good time. Yet leading my heart with wisdom. And he sought to lay hold on folly, just to do the silly things, until I might see where the good for the sons of men might be, what they should do under the heavens all the days of their life. So he's conducting an experiment in his life so that he could write it down so that other men can follow his advice. And what does he do? He just does whatever he wants to do. He lives a life of mirth and folly and laughter and all the things that people think lead to happiness in their life. Verse 4 now. He says, I made my works great. I built houses for myself. Not one house, houses. I just built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself, he says. I made gardens and orchards for myself. Notice that all these things he's doing is for who? For himself. He says, I planted trees in all of them, all of the fruit. So he had lots of different fruit trees in his gardens and orchards. He says, I made pools of water for myself to water the forest, shooting forth trees. I bought slaves and slave women, and sons of the house were mine. Also livestock, a herd, and a great flock were mine, above all that were before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered silver and gold to myself. So he made himself as rich as he could. And he took the treasure of the kings of the provinces. I got men singers and women singers for myself, and the delights of the sons of men, a wife and very many wives. He wasn't content just to have one wife. He had many wives, according to his word. Did that make him happy? Well, I don't know. Let's keep reading. I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. He had more than anybody, he says. He was great. He says, my wisdom remained with me. And you all know the story about that, how he had prayed and asked God for wisdom, and God granted it to him because he did ask for it. Verse 10 now. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. So whatever he wanted, he took it. I did not withhold my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and that was my part of all of my labor. His part was to rejoice that labor was being done. You see that? Then I looked on all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor that I had labored to do. All these things that we just read about that he had done, or caused to be done. And behold, what does he say? All is vanity and vexation of spirit. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that something is vanity and vexation of spirit, that does not sound like a happy comment. It sounds like a sad comment. He's saying that vanity was all useless. There was no point to it. And vexation of spirit means that he was annoyed. In his spirit, he was annoyed by all of it. And, continuing, there's no profit under the sun. Now, that does not sound like a happy man, does it? Verse 12 now. And I turned to behold wisdom, and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king when they've already done it? He's done everything. That's why he's writing it down. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly. Wisdom is better than folly, as far as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And I also knew that one event happens to all of them. So what he's doing, he's looking back at everything he's done, knowing that his days are almost over. He's going to die. And so now he's wondering, what was it all about? He had to become an old man to start to ask that question. What's it all about? We're blessed in that we can ask that question without having come to that point in our life, without having wasted our whole life. Then I said in my heart, verse 15, as it happens to the fool, so it happens even to me. And why was I then more wise? How is it that I'm wiser than anybody else? I'm going to die just like they are. And I said in my heart, this is also vanity. This is also nothingness. My wisdom is nothing, is what he's saying. For there is no memory of the wise more than of the fool forever, since that which is now shall all be forgotten in the days to come. And we know that. How much do we know about our great-grandparents and their parents before them? We don't really know much about them, do we? Unless we were fortunate and blessed enough to have our families write things down and pass them on to us. But we don't know much about them. He's saying that he's recognizing that, you know what, everything that I've done is going to be done away with and forgotten about. So he says, how does the wise die above the fool? He's asking that question. Well, how am I any better for my wisdom, Solomon is, than a fool who has no wisdom? You can see why he's very annoyed in his life. Because he's come to the end of his life and he's recognizing that all the things that he's done, even his wisdom that God gave him, he's wasted all of it. It's not helped him that much at all. Ecclesiastes 2:17 now. Therefore, I hated life. Does that sound like a happy man? Doesn't to me. Why? Why did he hate life? Because the work that's done under the sun is sad to me. Why is it sad? Because he can't take it with him. He's wasted all of his time on building and gathering stuff to himself, and the one thing that could make him happy, he did not do. He says, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Verse 18 now. Yes, I hated all my labor which I had done under the sun, that I must leave it to the man who shall be after me. See, he wants to take it with him, but he recognizes that he can't take it with him. He never could have. And all this time he wasted trying to gather to himself, he missed the point of life. And now at the end here, he's unhappy. Verse 19, who knows whether this man who comes after me shall be a wise or a fool? Yet he shall have rule over all my labor in which I have labored, and acted wisely under the sun. This is also vanity. It's nothingness. It's complete uselessness to him. Verse 20, and I turned to cause my heart to despair over all the labor which I did under the sun. He became despondent, despairing. One of those definitions we read about being the opposite of happy. He turned his heart to despair. He'd done all these things, and he recognized that they didn't bring him happiness, and he's going to leave them to somebody else after all that. Verse 21. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 21. When there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and with success, yet to a man who has not labored in it, he shall leave it for his share. This is vanity and a great evil. That's kind of a sad outlook, isn't it? But yet when you work all your life to gather stuff for yourself, and you come down to the end of your life and you've not done those things that make you happy, that give you the warm and happy memories of your life, then it's just vanity. You've wasted your whole life, is what he's saying. That's what vanity is. It's a waste and a great evil, he says. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 22. For what has man from all his labor, and from the troubling of his heart, in which he has labored under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his labor sadness. Yes, his heart does not take rest in the night. This is also vanity. What a sad thing to have to say about your life as you reach down toward the end of it. That you've forgotten the things that were important, or you never knew them, or you never sought them out. Yeah, he sought wisdom, but obviously as you get toward the end, he's realized that he didn't apply wisdom. It didn't help him. He didn't apply it the way he should have. We're going to stop right there in Ecclesiastes 2 and go down to Psalms 127 and verse 3. We're going to start to ask the question, what brings happiness? Well, God does tell us what brings happiness. You might not have realized that. But God does tell us what brings happiness. Psalms 127 and verse 3 now. He says, lo, well that means look. Or if you want to use today's vernacular, looky here. Lo, children are heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. Notice what he is will make you happy. Children make you happy. And not make you ashamed. Or rather, you won't make them ashamed. And they'll speak with the enemies in the gate. They'll have positions of leadership. They'll have people who will look to them because of their leadership ability, because they have children they've raised up. Now, does this mean every child is going to be perfect and is going to do the right things? Of course not. That's not what our purpose is talking about here today. God says that, first of all, children are a sign that you have something from the Lord. It's a heritage. Someone to go to raise up after you. And that if you have your quiver full of them, whether it's 3, 5, 10, or more, as some of our children have, then it causes them not to be ashamed, but to be leaders. That's what the meaning of the term speak with the enemies in the gate. They're leaders of the people. So that's one of the things that will bring happiness in our life. But we have to pay attention to the children. We can't just throw them out there and ignore them and not pay any attention to them. It has to be that we are looking at them and watching them and recognize them for what they are, a heritage from the Lord. Let's go to the next chapter now, Psalm 128, beginning in verse 1. One of the things that will give us happiness, cause us to be happy, and this is something that Jeff doesn't have, he doesn't even understand that he should have, is a right relationship with God. That will cause us to be happy. It's because of the rewards we will get from God in this world and in the next. And those rewards are not necessarily physical wealth, or the things that distract us from God. Those things are things that happen along the way, and if we're fortunate, God will let that happen to us. But they can be a deceptive sort of happiness. So we have to be very careful if God gives us physical wealth not to fall away. Psalms 128, verse 1. Blessed, that very first word, that's the exact same word translated happy in Psalm 127:5 we just read. So, blessed or happy is everyone that fears the Lord, that walks in his way. So if we have a right attitude, a right relationship with God, we will be happy. Well, why is that? Well, let's read further. For you shall eat the labor of your hands. Happy you shall be, and it shall be well with you. Your wife shall be as a fruitful vine by the sides of your house, and your children like olive plants round about your table. This is a depicting of a family sitting around the table, a happy family, children that are loved by their parents, and parents who love their children and each other. Verse 4, Behold, that thus shall the man be blessed that fears the Lord. The Lord shall bless you out of Zion, and you shall see the good of Jerusalem all the days of your life. And we will see the good of Jerusalem in time. Yes, you shall see your children's children, and peace upon Israel. That's the ultimate blessing, isn't it? Someday when we have that change made to us, and this is part of being happy, we keep this vision in mind. Someday when our change is perfected, we will become like God in form and even in power. We're going to see all of our children's children, not just the ones who are living with us today, but those who come after us. And they'll gather around us and ask questions about us. Well, what was it like to live back then? How did you come to be in this state? Can you imagine the sheer joy of having all those children around you, talking to them? Isn't that a wonderful insight? And that's what God's talking about, being happy, keeping these things in mind, staying close to Him. That's how we'll know we're happy, for sure. We won't have this depressing outlook on life that so many seem to have. Psalms 144:12 now. One of the things that will come with our happiness are some good things in life. And David even wrote about them. But notice what he writes about as being the good things in life. Psalm 144 verse 12. That our sons may be as plants grown up in their youth, that our daughters may be as cornerstones, polished after the similitude of a palace. That our garners may be full. We've got plenty of food stored to eat, affording all manner of store, that our sheep may bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our streets. That our oxen may be strong to labor, that there be no breaking in nor going out, that there be no complaining in our streets. Happy is that people that is in such a case. Yes, happy is that people whose God is the Lord. So David's talking about sons and daughters and plenty of food, the flocks are producing, and so he has available to him the ability to help other people who don't have as much. And as we're going to see, that's part of being happy, being able to help other people who are not as blessed as we are. Psalm 146 and verse 3 now. Remember that Solomon indicated that striving for wealth was vanity, didn't he? We just got through reading that. Psalm 146 verse 3. Put not your trust in princes, nor in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. Don't trust in other people for your happiness. Don't do it. They're not going to make you happy, and more often than not, they're going to disappoint you. Verse 4. Speaking of this princes, his breath goes forth, he returns to the earth. In that very day his thoughts perish. No, he doesn't go up to heaven, play on a harp with on a cloud with a harp. It says, in that day his thoughts perish. Happy is he that has the God of Jacob for his help, whose hope is in the Lord his God. Verse 6. Which made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that therein is, which keeps truth forever. Want to be happy in your life? Worship the God of Jacob. And that in itself is a number of serpents, what it means to worship God. And we know we have to worship him the way that he wants to be worshipped, not the way we want to worship him. If we want to be happy, though, we need to be worshiping the God of Jacob. And our hope should be in him, not from princes, as David's writing here. Don't put our trust in men for our happiness, because we will be disappointed. But if we trust in God for our happiness and for the things that he provides, and recognize that God provides these things to us, then we will truly be happy. Does this mean we'll be happy every minute of the day? No, of course not. We are told to rejoice in suffering. So we're going to suffer, but be happy. Why? Because this isn't the end. There's still a better day to come. Let's look at Proverbs 3 and verse 13. Instead of striving for those things, those physical, carnal things, like Jeff said, he wanted to have all the women and all the money. And he found out that didn't make him happy. And that's what he strived for. And looking back, he realized none of those things made him happy, but the things that made him happy were his wife and his children and just watching his puppies playing in his yard. Those are the things that made him happy, made him laugh, gave him reason for joy. We need to also strive for the things of God to make us happy. And those are among the things of God. And we've been reading that so far in the scriptures. Proverbs 3 verse 13. Happy is the man that finds wisdom. Well, we know that Solomon found wisdom, but he wasn't happy, was he? He didn't make a right use of wisdom. He was wise enough to know how to do all of those things he did, but he lacked a certain wisdom that caused him to understand that he needed to have his wife and his children around him and to concentrate on those things for his happiness. Verse 14, for the merchandise of it, meaning wisdom, is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof is more than fine gold. She's more precious than rubies, and all the things that you can desire are not to be compared to her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are the ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. I'm a motorcycle rider, or have been in the past, and one of the sayings that we were taught when we were trained to ride a motorcycle, he says there are old motorcycle riders and there are bold motorcycle riders, but there are no old, bold motorcycle riders. And so what we're talking about is riding a motorcycle wisely, but not taking an unreasonable risk when you're riding a motorcycle. And that's what really is being talked about here in Proverbs 3. Finding wisdom, using your life wisely, using it for the reasons that God wants you to use them. Verse 18, continue about wisdom. She's a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retains her. And I would add to that, happy is everyone who uses her properly, as Solomon came to find out. Proverbs 14 and verse 20 now. One of the things that is of God is to love our neighbor and to have mercy on the poor, not to hate them. When we look at the poor people, do we say, well, that guy, he just wasted his life and he's just a terrible individual, and see him over there, he's on the corner begging for bread, and he's just no good. He's just a sorry individual. Is that how we look at people who are not as blessed as we are? If it is, I submit that we need to change. We need to repent. But God wants us to have mercy on them, to pity them, to love them, because in their time they're going to have an understanding too. God's going to use them as well. Proverbs 14 verse 20, the poor is hated even of his own neighbor. And we could say that. People all around, if they see somebody's poor, they talk down about them. But the rich has many friends. Yeah, they do. And they're not friends either. They're just people who are around them because they're rich. Verse 21. He that despises his neighbor sins. We know that from many of the scriptures. If we hate our neighbor, we're sinning. We might as well have murdered him. But he that has mercy on the poor, happy is he. That's a very powerful statement. He that has mercy on the poor, happy is he. Now we have an opportunity, I'm going to take in a little bit of a side now. We have an opportunity to help a group in Africa, congregation, who's been buffeted by the diseases in Kenya, and we should help them if we can. I'm currently trying to find out more information about it. It's the same group that we sent the Bibles to here a few weeks ago. If it's possible for us to help them, we've got money in our treasury right now. We probably should help them, but I want to be satisfied that we're not throwing money away. I'm trying to figure out whether or not what they're trying to do to lift themselves up, and if we know they have a plan of action, then we're not just throwing money at them. Then we can probably give them a helping hand of some kind, and that will bring happiness to us because we will know that people who are desperately in need, we were able to help simply because we give offerings as God commanded. And even so, we're obeying God. We give our offerings on our holy days, and we take those and we use those for things that are pleasing in God's sight. That's how we can be happy in our lives. And not just because we do it as a church, but because we do these things individually. You know, I'm always amazed at the things that my brother Todd and Alfreda do for the people around them, because they're always there to help them and love on them, even sometimes when they're not really very lovable. And that's a sign that God is doing something powerful with them, and it's a glorious thing for me to behold that, and I know that it makes them happy when they see they can help other people. We'll turn over to Proverbs 16:20 now. We know that trusting in God is involved with happiness. And we've seen that because David wrote about it and Solomon wrote about it. Proverbs 16 verse 20. He who handles a matter wisely shall find good, and whoever trusts in the Lord, happy is he. And that's us. We put our trust in the Lord. We know that Solomon wrote that he has never seen the children of God go begging bread in the streets. And we haven't seen it either. Why is that? Because when the brethren are hurting, we try to rally around the brethren and help them. We had prayers today from our brethren up in Oklahoma. We lifted them up to God. Why? We don't know them, but because we love them. We know they're part of what God is doing, and in someday we'll get to see them and know what God actually did in response to our prayer. Okay. How can we know if we're happy? It seems a strange question, doesn't it? Unless we know what being happy truly is, then we can't know whether or not we're truly happy. We might have some mirth and think that's happiness. But when we look back in our lives, what things actually made us happy? Wasn't it being able to spend that time with our wives or our children, or doing something that brought us a little closer together? Isn't that what really made us happy? I know it is for me. You know, in my past, before I met Susie, I drank a lot. And I thought, you know, and I had a lot of women, I'll be honest with you. And I drank a lot. And I thought, you know, this is as good as it gets. And I was truly an unhappy individual. And it wasn't until I met Susie that I started to realize what happiness was. And yeah, I was married before Susie, but I wasn't happy. I was married because it was the thing to do. But knowing Susie, and then later on, in that condition, coming to God calling me and bringing me to Christ, and even in my inadequate performance under His laws, knowing that He, God, is there for me and watching over me and caring for me, and He's going to bring me through all the problems. Yes, there are trials, and we've been undergoing some trials, but you know what? I've got Susie standing here with me, loving me and making my life happy. even if our situation isn't the best. God seems to be saying that in order to know whether we are truly happy, we have to dwell on how blessed we are. And that's a fact. If you want to look back, see if you're happy, look back at your life. What things has God blessed you with? The calling out of the world. Did he cause things to bypass you that happen to other people? We need to dwell on those blessings that God's given us in order to know how happy we really are. This means that during our meditation time, we should consider our blessings while praising God for them as we dwell on them. We look back and say, God, you brought me to this point in my life, and I wasn't worthy, but you saw something there, and you blessed me with these children, and you blessed me with this wonderful mate. You've never made me go hungry. I've always had plenty to eat, everything I wanted to eat. These things we look at in our meditation when we think about what God's done for us. This is how to know when we're happy. Dwelling on what God's done for us. We don't dwell on the things we don't have, but things that we do have. If we dwell on the fact that our neighbor has a bigger, nicer car than we do, or has more money than we do, or whatever, a nicer house, or a bigger yard, or better plants in his yard, if we dwell on those things, we're not going to be happy, because we're dwelling on the things that did not come from God, the things that Satan wants us to dwell on, that make us unhappy. Instead, we need to dwell on the things that we do have, to realize that we have so much that God's given us simply because he loves us. So happiness then is that feeling we get when we dwell on the blessings God has given us, from our calling and forgiveness, to the way he keeps us on the path, to how he moves things in our favor just as he promised. Look at all the times we've seen people healed simply because we prayed for them. Those are the things that bring happiness. Therefore, if we want to know if we're happy, we need to consider how much time we're spending thinking of the many blessings of God that we enjoy. Because if we don't think about them, Satan will surely give us something to think about, and those things will not bring happiness to it. But if we think about the things that God's done for us, we'll know we're happy, because we will experience that happiness. In conclusion, I'm going to go back to Ecclesiastes 2 and pick it up in verse 24, I think it was. Yes, verse 24. Let Solomon give us the conclusion to our message today. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 24. Isn't it good that he should eat and drink and make his soul to see good in his labor? See the difference there? See, Solomon did all these things, but he wasn't seeing the good. Now he gets old, he says, isn't it good to see the good, to see the things that God has done? This I also saw, notice this, that it was from the hand of God. You want to be happy? See what God has done for you and for those around you, for your family. Verse 25, for who can eat or who can enjoy apart from me? He's saying, who could do better than he did? He had everything. That's what he's saying there. And what is his conclusion? It was from God. That's how he can be happy. For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to the sinner he gives labor to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him who is good before God. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. You see, if we look to God and acknowledge the things that he has done for us, and recognize that we didn't do these things, it was God that did them for us, then we'll be happy. And the man who goes out there and does all of this building up like he had done, like Solomon had done, all these things that he had done, he says he's going to give it to somebody else. But one thing that can't be taken away from us is the happiness that we enjoy as being a part of what God is doing in our lives. But in order to enjoy that happiness, we need to stop and meditate on those things. Think about those things that God has done. Because when we stop and think about those things, we will realize that God has done so very, very much for us in our lives. With that, we'll go ahead and close the message for today. Thank you for coming, and those of you who will be watching this message on the Facebook, hopefully we'll have the church open again and you guys can join us in church. We'd love to have you guys.